Let's talk about cloud services model. How cloud delivers services to you, and you may hear different terms like IaaS, PaaS, platform as a service. So we'll talk about that too. And we'll then discuss about how AWS specific services actually work. Now, what is a service? A very basic definition which I have here is something that helps you to do something, right? So maybe you can take help of a delivery service to get your package from point A to point B. Maybe you are taking help of a coffee machine to get a coffee. All the ingredients are there and it knows what to do when somebody presses a button. It mixes into the ratio, heats up the things, adds sugar maybe, and then deliver the coffee to you. Or it could be a mix of machines and human. Like if you go to a coffee shop, there is a barista and coffee machines. They work together to deliver you a service. So that is a basic concept of a service. Now in cloud, the cloud services are differentiated into different aspects. I'll talk about these services in a minute, but let me give you an example here so that you could relate these concepts to cloud services into the next slide. So I'm talking here about service of pizza, pizza as a service. So let's say you're craving for pizza. I want to have pizza for my dinner. What my options are? One option is I could make it home if I'm a good cook. uh, I'm not. I'm a terrible cook, so I won't try that. Maybe for me, the thing could work would be take and bake. So there are a lot of grocery stores where I could go and get a frozen pizza and then bake it at home. That would be much convenient. More convenient if I need that, then I may go for a pizza delivery service. It would be a fresh pizza made for me and delivered to me hot. Or maybe we can order as many as we want. We do not need to worry about the quality of it because those people know how to bake a pizza and how to make it delicious, so they can help me in this case. Next could be I don't want to worry about anything at all and I just want to eat out. That is another option, right? So these are the four options. Now, let's see how my responsibility would change with every model which we are having on the screen here. So if I'm making pizza at home, then I have to take care of everything. I have to select the cheese which will go into it, which toppings I want to add, tomato sauce, pizza dough, fire, oven, electricity or gas, soda, and dining table. I would be managing all these things if I want to enjoy my pizza. If I feel that I want to take and bake, then a vendor has already taken care of making the pizza. It has already been put with cheese and topping, sauce, and pizza dough is already there. It's all ready to eat, ready to use stuff. I could just bring it home and I could then manage it. I could just start baking it. So the basic stuff has been taken care by a vendor. I am taking care of fire, oven, electricity, soda, and dining table in this case. Or if I'm saying I would go for a pizza delivery option, then I don't have to worry about anything, even oven, electricity. I just have to take care of dining table and soda, and I can enjoy my pizza. And if I feel I have to go and eat out, then I don't have to worry at all. I just need money in my pocket to pay for it, and I could enjoy pizza if I need to. Right. So you could clearly see that my responsibility are diminishing as we are moving into a different model, and vendors' responsibility are increasing with different model. Similar approach goes into cloud computing too. So I was trying to give you an analogy for pizza and cloud services. We will talk about how this relate to cloud services. If you're baking things home or making the pizza at home, that is your traditional approach of on-premises. You would host everything within your environment, and then you would start utilizing the services if you need to. Another approach here is infrastructure as a service, where I have leveraged the infrastructure of a service provider and still I am cooking it as per my recommendation or my requirement. Another one is platform as a service. We will relate these all concept into cloud world in a minute, but platform as a service where I'm just taking care of pizza delivery. Sorry, I'm just getting a pizza delivered and I'm just taking care of basic stuff. And then when I'm into eat out, think of it as a software as a service model where you just utilize basic services and you just start building services from there. Right. So let's go ahead and talk about these service models here as we see into cloud world. So if I feel that I have to host an application and I would take care of everything from top to bottom, from networking, storage, server up to application layer. That is a traditional on-prem approach where you have to manage all the stuff on your own. If you feel no, I would go with a different approach. I would want my vendor to take care of some things for me like virtualization, server, storage, and networking. And once this is ready, I would then take care of the remaining stuff like operating system, data to handle, application to run, and that would be my infrastructure as a service model. If I'm an administrator, this model will appeal more to my use cases because as an admin, I may be deploying servers, I may be taking care of connectivity, I may be taking care of storage or expanding storage when needed. In this case of infrastructure as a service, that infrastructure would be provided to me by cloud provider, my vendor, and I would just utilize services on top of it. If I want to go further and want to abstract away more details, I could say, okay, I would go with this model where I want my service provider to even take care of my runtime environment. Let's say I am running Java .NET type of workload and I don't want to even worry about installing .NET or Java. I just want to have my application data stored, and on top of it, I would then start running my application. So that is another model. We would refer this as a platform as a service. A platform has been provided to you and you just leverage it. So if I'm a developer, I would be getting this as a beneficial thing for myself because now I don't have to worry about installing Java, .NET, PHP and then maintaining their update. I could just write my code and then platform is provided where it can execute and I can collect log, I can do troubleshooting, any debugging required. So that would be much appealing for me if I am a developer. And if I'm talking about an end user perspective, then end user doesn't worry about end users do not want to worry about the basic stuff that how the service is delivered. So we can deliver them just the service, whatever they need, software as a service. I want to use, let's say, WebEx. Now WebEx is hosted by Cisco. They maintain those server, they maintain the operating system of those server, they apply patches to the server, and I as a user just register my account and get started. Like I am utilizing a service from Salesforce. Salesforce gives me CRM, a customer relationship management software, and I can just log into their platform, pay some money, whatever the plan I want to buy, and I can start utilizing that. If I'm using an email service from a service provider, they maintain all the software and I just consume that software. That is my software as a service. So if I'm an end user, then this software as a service would be more appealing to me and I would get more benefit because of it. So it is the way of delivering the service. At the end, it would depend on what you want to manage and what you want to be managed by your service provider. Based on that, based on your requirement of application, you could go to any of these models. Now, over a period of time, the line between these models are becoming blur and blur every day. You may find some product which can give you infrastructure also, platform also, and they have a version of software as a service too. So the line can become blur, but keep this idea at back of your mind, and we will use some of the services in AWS which will be either infrastructure or platform or software as a service, but I won't differentiate them. I would just call them all web services which I want to use. Here you can clearly see that maybe if I'm looking for more control, I may look for infrastructure based services because then I can install my own operating system, my monitoring agents, whatever I need in platform and software as a service. I may not have that much of control. And I may not want to take control of unnecessary things like patching and update. I would let vendor manage it and let me focus on my core expertise, which will help my business to grow. Okay, so hope this is clear. Let's keep moving forward and let's talk about how we access these services. I would now switch gears and talk about AWS specific services. So I want to access AWS services. Right? Everything in AWS is available as a web service. So I would just need a connectivity up to that service endpoint and then I can start accessing this service. So we will talk about how to access these services. To get started, what you would need an AWS account. AWS account is your identification in the whole wide AWS world. To get started, you can create an AWS account, and to create an account, you would need an email address. You need to provide your credit card information, and you have to maybe provide your mobile number for some verification purpose. And once you have taken care of that, you would get an AWS account. Right? I don't want to go into details of how to create account. There are a lot of documentation and YouTube videos available. Very easy, like for any other services, you go and on a web portal, you provide your detail, provide your information, and then an account gets created. You get an email. In that, other information about how to access, how to reach out to support would be mentioned. Same thing happens with AWS also. So once this account is ready, what I get? You can think of account as a container. Now don't confuse this container with the Docker container for running application. Container here is like a isolation for the resources what I would be creating. So once your account gets created, AWS allocates you a account ID. So a 12-digit account ID is given to you, and that is uniquely identifying your account. The email address you have used for creating this account becomes the root user for this AWS account. I'm using here a symbol of a person wearing a crown. That is your root user. As king has no limit in his or her own kingdom. Similarly, same thing applies in AWS account too. This root user has unprecedented access of everything within that account. There is no way you could limit this user. Obviously then it becomes very sensitive in terms of security that we safeguard this account. We'll talk more on that, how to safeguard this. But as soon as you get a AWS account created for yourself, you would have a root user privilege. Once you log in through email address and the specified password, you would get access to everything in AWS account. Now obviously, that access won't be required for every type of persona who may want to use this AWS account. So we have some services. One of them is Identity and Access Management, or in short, we call it IAM. This would allow me to create user group policies and roles so I can give users only the privilege they need to perform their day-to-day task. We'll talk more on IAM, very interesting topic that is coming up. Once this is set up, I would start creating my resources. So whatever I create, those resources exist into the boundary of my account. So I may create a Lambda function here, or I may say, hey, I am going to create a load balancer, or I am going to create a data lake. Everything would be inside my account, and obviously I have mechanism to share with others if I need to, or I can keep it completely private if the need be. So that is an AWS account. All right, more on that is coming. Now, once I have settled down and created an account, what next? I could start experimenting. And for that experimentation, AWS gives me free tier. This free tier allows you to access AWS resources. There are three type of access you can get into free tier. Let me talk about the type of offers you get. On the very right, you see always free. So some services would always be free regardless of when the account was created. In the middle, you can see 12 months free. These services are free only for 12 months. Means today, if you created account, up to 12 months, those services would be free. Afterward, there would be a charge to pay. And then some services may give you a free trial. I want to experiment with that service maybe for 10 days, 15 days. So depending on the service, a free trial may be available and you can get more detail of it here. So if I'm just looking for 12 months free, I would see this information, compute, storage, and database. Now, these free tier has a limit of how much I can use. It's not like I can run my Bitcoin mining machine in unlimited capacity. I am limited to what I am allowed in free tier. So if I'm looking for one service here, which is called Amazon EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud to run virtual servers, it would give me two. So these are small machines to experiment with, and I would get 750 hours per month for these type of machine with these operating system. But if I'm going beyond that 750 hours, I would be required to pay the money. So yes, there is a free tier, but it doesn't mean everything is free. In free tier, whatever resources are available, and if you are within that limit, you will not be charged. But if you go beyond it, you would be charged. So be careful about billing, because you do not want to pay unnecessary for the resources which you have forgot to shut down. I'll talk about that also. But yes, if you are experimenting, you have to be little disciplined into the way you utilize these services and remove those services once your work is done. And there are ways where you can identify if you are going over the budget. So free tier is available for you to get started. You could use it, and you can use one service called AWS budget, and you can set up a budget of whatever amount you like. Maybe you can set up a budget of $5. If your estimation is going beyond $5, it can trigger an email, and obviously you have to take action and then remove those resources or shut down those resources which may be accumulating money. Right? So budget service is there, and again, a lot of articles are available on internet in which you can find how to set up a budget. So if you are doing this thing on your own, I would suggest to set up a low budget, maybe get an email triggered once you hit that budget limit, and maybe take corrective action so you don't end up paying a lot of money unnecessarily. Okay, so that is what free tier is. So let's say you set a budget, let's say you started your AWS account, how I would access these services. Everything in AWS is a service, and you would connect to these services through multiple mechanisms which are available. Depending on your use case, you may utilize these three methods. One is a management console, that is a graphical interface, a browser-based interface by which I could access AWS services. So if I'm going here and I say, hey, I want to sign into the console, depending on my credential, if they are cached, I would end up logging into a management console. So this is a management console, or called console home. You can obviously check who I am right now. So I am logged in into account called Cloud Tech Learning as a user called admin, and this is the 12-digit number I was talking about. I am a user here whose name is admin. I am not root here. If I was root, I would have a @email address like login, not a IAM user. Right. So I'm not root. I am a standard user with admin privileges in this account starting with 5031. This console can be very useful tool to get started with. I would see here search option. So let's say I want to work on specific service. Now, before you know about service, you may just want to utilize, let's say I want to just create a database in cloud. So just type database here. It would start listing all the services which has something to do with databases, and you could see there are 19 results coming up. It would also list not only services but also features within those services which may help you. So this is very intuitive search interface by which I would get service detail, feature details, additional resources, any blog post related to it, plus documentation of it, database on AWS, how to choose. So this is a very common thing, which database to use. So you could see the documentation is just available in the search. Even knowledge articles available and any tutorials on that. Plus, if any events are happening related to what you search, that will also be displayed. And then marketplace, which is a partner solution. AWS has lots of partner, and those partner may also have some solution which may relate to databases. So that is also highlighted. So use this search box if you are beginner to your advantage. Maybe I want to run some compute workload. I could search for compute, and it would start displaying me that what are my options available for running compute workload. Another good thing, I can put some of them as favorites. So if I use Elastic Beanstalk a lot, maybe I could hit it here, and then it would start showing up here, so I don't have to keep on searching. If you don't want to search from here, still my options are there, then you can look for services which are grouped into categories. So analytics, AR and VR, compute, containers, end user computing, developer tools, these are categories of the services. And once I go inside, I would be able to see relevant services on that. Right. So pretty user friendly interface. You can get help at the all the options. Like here I can get info and it will tell me that how I can customize it. Here I can add widget, so I can maybe also see what is the service health. I can see cost and usage of my account. I'm using a demo account here. There is no cost as of now. And then you could build solution, trusted advisor, explore AWS. So pretty intuitive interface, and you can also add your own widget if you require in this. Own in the sense that whatever is available here, you could select from them, and then it would customize the experience of console for you. So that is a easiest way to get started, which is a management console. We will do a lot of experimentation on the console. Second way for me to get started is a command line. So if I feel that I have to do a lot of repeated tasks and I don't want to do that from graphical interface every time, I could write script or run some command on my command line. For that, you would need a AWS CLI installed, and here I have already installed AWS CLI, a standard package available for Windows, Linux, and Mac operating system. Download from AWS website, install it, and once it is installed, you should be able to fire up command to AWS. So here I am checking that which version of AWS CLI I am running. Don't worry, you do not have to remember all these commands. AWS CLI 2.1.32 is what I am currently running. Okay, now from here I could start issuing commands, and there is help available in case I do not know what the command looks like or syntax is. I could always go into help and then get help from these. So these are all the help options available and these services which I can talk to. So depending on which service you want to talk to, you should be able to get help coming from it. Now, when you issue a command, what happens behind the scene that your request is routed to a endpoint. Whatever method I use, the request goes to an endpoint. Endpoint is a location on internet who responds to the request you send. Right? So if I'm trying to create a Lambda function, maybe if I'm trying to create a S3 bucket, that request has to go to an endpoint, and that endpoint will perform some verification whether I'm a valid user or not, whether it is a valid request or not, whether all the required parameters are provided or not, and then allow me to create or modify or update or list those resources. Right? I do not have a lot of resources running in my account here. So let me just show you that service endpoint, how it looks like. I am trying to talk to a service called EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud, and I want to describe regions in that service. Hope you remember the regions. So once I press enter, I have leveraged AWS command to list the regions associated with the service called EC2. So what I'm seeing here, that if I send a request to EC2 in AP South 1, that request basically goes to this endpoint. So endpoint is the door on which my request would knock, and depending on the permissions and other things, it would be allowed to come in and perform operations. So that is my endpoint. You don't have to take care of these endpoint manually. The service is smart enough, it would take care of things for you, but in case you want to send request to a specific endpoint, that is also possible. You could do that, shouldn't be an issue. So if I'm utilizing a management console, here is my option to select an endpoint where I want to talk to which region, and then in that individual service, I would be selecting a region. So that is another option, which is my command line. Now, these are like more of a person or a individual administrator or developer doing something. What if I want my programs or applications to interact to AWS? I have written code into Java, and that code should interact with AWS services and then perform something. And for that, I would need something called tools and SDK. These tools and SDK stand for Software Development Kit. These are for common languages Java, .NET, PHP, Python. So you could write code in that language, which is Python, Java, .NET, whatever you prefer, and that language code can then interact with AWS services. So this is way more useful to developers who would be doing a lot of development on AWS, or who would be creating application who would interact with AWS services. So that is what tools and SDKs. So you select the method you want to use, and they would all allow you to interact with AWS services. Shouldn't be a problem. What happened behind the scene, whatever front end or front method you choose, at the back end, when a request goes to an endpoint, it is just an API call. API stands for Application Programming Interface. It is a way how a request is sent and how a response is received from the server. So this is a language of communication between your server and client that is called an API. Right. More on this would be coming later when we'll discuss about some other services. But everything you do on AWS is an API call. You do not manually make an API call. You use these tools listed here like Management Console, Command Line, or Tools and SDK to make a API call on your behalf to AWS services. Now, if you want to go into more detail of when to use Management Console or CLI or SDK, I have created this single slides which I call service summary cards. So I would be keeping that into resources section, and you can read them to get more information. So this is my management tools. Then here is CLI, which you could refer to, and here is AWS SDK. Now I want to talk a little bit more on SDK. Let me click on this link, which will take me to awsamazon.com developer/tools. So these are some of the tools which I can leverage to build on AWS, right? I may select my language of choice, C++, Java, .NET, Python, Ruby, common used languages, and I can get started building them. I could browse by tool types. I am looking for command line tools. I am looking for some collaboration SDK. I am looking for ID toolkits, which if let's say if I am a developer and I am utilizing, let's say, Java, Eclipse for Java, maybe I'm using PyCharm for writing Python code, or I'm a Visual Studio developer, so I could get these toolkits, get it configured, and it would make my life much easier. So once these toolkits are ready and installed, then my IDE, Integrated Development Environment, would allow me to directly talk to AWS services, and then depending on, I may utilize different SDKs which we were referencing, like for JavaScript, PHP, .NET, Ruby, Node.js, C++. These are commonly used SDKs which you could download and get started. All right. So hope this is clear. Let's go forward and talk about how we would be building on these, how we would build applications. So AWS services are building blocks for your application. We all have played with Lego, I'm pretty sure, right? Or maybe some of us still play, and I'm not judging anyone because I also play with that sometimes. So this Lego blocks gives you a way to create whatever you want, right? Maybe if you want to just build a small crocodile like this, you could, or if you want to build a model of a house, you could, depending on you have the right types of blocks with you, or maybe there are Lego blocks available to create a full-blown meeting room like a setup here. So that is all possible. Similarly, AWS Services gives you an option to identify what services will work for your favor into application and just utilize those services. It's not like mandatorily you have to use every service. So like here is a small example of a genomic workflow on AWS, and this is using some services here like Fargate, Lambda, DynamoDB, and other services are not required. Or maybe I have a little more complex architecture here in which I have more services interacting with each other, and then I am able to achieve whatever my application wanted to do. So these are like Lego blocks for developers, Lego block for admins, Lego block for system administrators who can manage and maintain their infrastructure, application, and services by utilizing these AWS services, right? So hopefully this thing is clear. You got a better understanding of the basic concept. So I'll stop here. I hope you are enjoying the training. If you have any feedback, any suggestion, any criticism, let me know on my LinkedIn profile. Even if you do not have any suggestion, if you like the training, just let me know. And if you have any ideas how we can improve it, or you have a better analogy to explain a concept, let me know that too, and I can try to include it. Okay. So I'll talk to you into the next section. Thanks for listening.